Welcome to Our City Matters. Today we have two new guests that you may have seen around town. Today we have Captain Soucy with the Manchester PD and Lieutenant O'Keefe from the Manchester PD. We appreciate having them today. They're going to be talking to us about community policing, which is a topic that needs a little more clarification, I think, and we're so appreciative that they've come by today. Welcome, officers.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
If you could introduce yourself and how long you've been on the force, Officer Soucy and Officer O'Keefe, and basically your area of expertise.
Sure. My name's Captain James Soucy. I've been with the Manchester Police Department now for about 23 years. I've been assigned as the commander of the Community Policing Division for about a year now. I took over for Captain Riley. I've been working with Brian for about that entire year. We did work prior to that in the patrol division, so we have some experience working together in different areas of the department. But my career has certainly spanned different areas in the department as well, detectives, patrol, juvenile. So I've had the opportunity to work in different areas, as has Brian, and I'm fortunate enough now to work with a great group of guys in the community policing division.
Great.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I've been with the department for 19 years. I just started my 20th year. And prior to this, I was a sergeant in community policing. I was fortunate enough to work with a great group of guys. Captain Soucy took over last July. We've hit the ground running. I'm the current public information officer as well. And we basically have 14 guys that work under us, along with a sergeant. So there's 17 total in the community policing division.
Oh my goodness. And that's what we need to find out, is the difference between the ordinary patrols and community policing. So we want to kind of accentuate community policing today. So if
Sure.
you want to just kind of elaborate on that.
Sure. Well, to give a basic understanding, essentially all of us, every officer in the department, everyone who's sworn, from the chief on down to the new officers walking the beat and driving in patrol cars now, all of us are police officers, and all of us do the same functions on the street. Patrol is essentially where everyone starts. Patrol is the first response to any particular calls for service, any 911 calls, any non-emergency calls. So your first encounter, the public's first encounter with the police officer, is generally going to be a patrol officer. We have our largest complement of officers in the patrol division. They respond on a daily basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to any type of emergency or non-emergency call. Within our department, we're fortunate enough to have various divisions that specialize in specific crimes. Community policing is one of those divisions. It's a division made up of 17 officers, 3 command staff, and 14 other officers. And we specialize in community-related issues, and they could span really anything from a landlord-tenant issue, ongoing parking issue, issues with trash, to senior citizens who are having trouble with scam artists coming by, a whole multitude of issues that we can spend a considerable amount of time on to try to resolve some of these issues. Unlike the patrol division, where if an officer goes, is responding to a call, gets to the call, takes the initial information, some, very bad crisis situations, others could be a parking complaint, a dog issue, a noise issue, things of that nature, and they move on to the next call for service. So many of those calls that need follow-up and really don't need to be followed up by either the detective division or the traffic division land in our lap. And that's where the community can have more contact, more access to a police officer on a regular basis, and that specifically comes from our division.
And I think to touch upon what Captain Soucy stated, we're basically proactive versus reactive. There's 2 types of policing. Patrol is more reactive, where someone calls the police department, requests to see an officer for a reason. That's reactive policing. They go out and they respond to the call. Community policing is typically proactive. We hope to get to the quality of life issues and the key components. I mean, basically, it's proactive problem solving centered on the causes of crime and disorder. So, like the captain stated, if it's a landlord-tenant issue or a parking issue, there's addresses that we go through every week that if patrol responds 3 or more times in 1 week, our guys will follow up on it and to see if we can cease and desist with the problem and come to the root of the problem and ultimately reduce the calls for service in that particular area for that particular issue.
Can we touch on one thing that the public might have concern about, and that is when they call the either the 911, I guess a person really knows that it's an emergency.
Right.
But if they call the direct line to the office and they get the dispatch, and the dispatch says, okay, they take the call, the complaint, whatever, and they may say at that time that it's not a priority, or that it, our offices are they're all busy.
Right.
And sometimes the community resident says, hey, why can't they take care of my problem? And talk about triage a little bit in the patrol division.
Well, triage is obviously, you hit the nail on the head. Triage is what we do on a daily basis. And primarily, the dispatch center receives all these calls for service on a regular basis. And they've gone up dramatically just in the last year. As Brian said, it's a proactive versus reactive approach. So we triage calls that come in. The priority calls obviously are handled first. A serious assault, robbery in progress, a shooting, a stabbing, crimes against persons that are happening right away. We triage these calls on a priority basis, and we send our officers to the highest priority call for service. Now, some of these lower priority calls for service doesn't necessarily mean they're not important calls, because everybody has a reason for calling and everybody needs attention and follow-up. But we don't have, we want to prioritize our manpower so that it goes to the right places at the right times. The person who calls in and says, hey, I got somebody breaking down my door, they're going to get a different response than somebody who says, hey, I got a dog that's been barking for 3 hours out back. You got to do something about this. I can't get any sleep. I'm trying to sleep at night. I have a midnight job. That doesn't necessarily mean, and it does not mean that they don't need attention and to have their problem resolved. What it means is they need their problem sent or focused to a different area of the department, and that's where we come in. And you bring up a good point. Oftentimes people are looking for that information from the dispatch center. It may be the first time they called the police in many years, and to them it's a big deal. To us, it's a routine call for service that may be placed down lower, on the tier of priority calls. But we train our officers and we train our dispatch personnel. We train our personnel to understand that every call is very important and needs follow-up. So if somebody does call in looking for services in the dispatch center, what we should do and what we do on a regular basis, and there are those that slip through the cracks, is we make sure that those people are directed to the services. For instance, that call, that loud barking dog or the parking complaint that's lower on the priority list will be sent to our division and should be directed over the phone by saying, things like, well, we have an officer in that area that specializes in, community-related issues. Here's his cell phone number, or here's his email address. Now, if they don't get that information, what the public should know is all this information is available on our website. It has a biographical information of every officer that's specific to that neighborhood, that's specific to that area. It has their telephone number, their cell phone number, their email, a direct line. And although they won't call that number and they may not get an immediate response, they may, but they may not. They certainly will get a call back from that officer.
And leave a message, and the officer will call you back.
Well, and to clarify, and the reason they may not get an immediate call back, our guys work a 4 and 2 schedule. They work 2 days, 2 nights, 2 days off. So if it happens at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night and he's either on his days off or he worked days that day, it doesn't mean that call's not important, and it certainly doesn't mean that call will not get a response. But the public needs to be aware that these guys are assigned to specific areas to deal with quality of life issues and crimes as well. But we want them to know that their call is important and our guys will follow up.
Right. Okay, John, how about we get into maybe the maps? Or maybe we can do the maps since we're
Sure.
talking about sector and area.
Sure.
We have, I think, 3 maps. And sorry to put you on the spot, John. Okay, so we have the, this is the hotspot map, from what I understand. Could you explain the hotspot map?
Right. Well, this particular map, it's also in conjunction with our sector maps. It's essentially what the city is broken up into sectors, and these sectors 1, 2, and 3 are staffed by patrol officers. What we do is we try to analyze the data that comes in on a regular basis, and our crime analysis bring this information to us in the form of a hotspot policing map. Now, all of our officers have been trained in all divisions in hotspot policing, and what we can do is we can look at these maps and we can determine on a weekly, a daily basis, a monthly basis where the specific crimes are occurring, what the frequency is, and how to either attack that problem or address that problem, either to mitigate it, maybe solve some of these issues, and really focus our manpower in these specific areas.
Okay.
It seems simple, but really the concept is something that it's sometimes somewhat technical because we want to make sure the officers have the right information. Patrol will handle these particular hotspot maps in a different fashion than, let's say, community policing would.
Okay, so let's go through the patrol sector map before we get to the community policing sector map. So that's the patrol map?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep,
so
that
it's...
patrol map is broken down into sectors. The area is broken up into certain sectors so that we know where our manpower is. We know how to identify which officers work in which area. And mind you, our administration, our chief, is a very big advocate of making sure police officers are assigned to a specific area for a longer period of time to make that connection to the community. So you may see the same officer in the same neighborhood on a regular basis over a long period of time. And that's part of that community connection. Now that's, in and of itself, that's separate than the community policing division, because we also have our officers assigned to specific areas in the city.
Okay, so that map is a little bit different.
Correct.
Okay, so if you put the community policing map...
So this particular map, really what it does is it identifies a specific area, an area within the city, obviously a very highly congested area, and it doesn't, some people may look at this and say, well, why isn't the community police division addressing the needs of the entire city? Why are some of the areas or some of the neighborhoods in the city seem to be missing in these areas that are pointed out on the map? And essentially what this does is this assigns at least 2 officers to an area of the city, and it doesn't exclude the areas outlying that, but we've addressed the most congested areas of the city so that these officers handle the problems within those areas as essentially that's part of their patrol area, their problem areas. So different than the patrol maps, more of an isolated area. But obviously we still respond to problems and we handle problems throughout the city.
So the resident can ask, if they don't know from the website, they
Sure.
could ask the dispatch or someone from when they call the office and ask, who is my community police officer?
Right.
And I live on this street, and they could be directed to that person.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think the biggest thing is because we have 17 people that work in the division, we have some turnover, we have some new dispatches. Dispatch may not, in fact, know that Officer Battistelli works on the west side. So that's why I think it's imperative that the public, if they have computer access, to go on the manchesternh.gov website, click on police departments, and as the captain stated, every biography is listed and what area of the city they patrol.
That's under community policing.
Under community policing, yes.
Okay. Okay, so now under community policing, we have some accessories, like we have horses and we have bikes. And so if John could put up the horse picture, we have a mounted police
Correct.
division.
That's our mounted unit. Our division is actually broken up into different specialized units. Everybody shares primarily the same community policing philosophy, the responsibilities, but we also have specialized units within our division, and one of them happens to be the mounted unit, which is made up of 2 mounts, 2 horses. They've actually changed throughout the years, over the last 10 or 12 years, I believe. And we have typically 2 mounted officers assigned to this unit. Recently, we just sent another officer to a school in Canada to get certified as a mounted officer. It was a 2-week intensive school in Canada. So now we have somebody, obviously in the event that we have to rotate some of these guys through, or somebody goes out injured or whatnot. But this particular unit is really, it's been around, I think, what, Brian, for 10 or more years now?
Almost 14 years.
Yeah, it's a self-funded unit. It's primarily handled specifically the care of the horses, and the actual barn and area and stalls that we house the horses is handled by a series of volunteers, in addition to the officers that are assigned over at the mounted unit. So again, it's a good collaborative effort between the community and the mounted officers. People will see our horses, our particular unit, at many different functions. As the weather approaches right now, the warm weather approaches, you'll see much more appearances by them on the Elm Street area, in the parks, on the rails, the trails, and you'll also see them at many city events. You'll see them at some of the Cops for Kids events that we have coming up. We do many events throughout the summer, community-related events, that you'll see this mounted unit show up.
I think it's important to note also that the mounted unit runs off of volunteers and private funds. They do their own fundraising. Although the city pays a salary of 2 officers to be on the horses, it doesn't really cost the city any money to have the horses. And we're always looking for volunteers, so if anyone's interested in volunteering, they can email either Officer Mark LaChance or Officer Fred
Very
Gillis.
nice, very nice. And the advantages of having the horses?
Well, there's several advantages, obviously. You have that connection right away to the community, that there's this presence, this tradition, this history. And you may have some naysayers, some people that say, well, obviously you have 2 officers who are assigned this particular unit, may not be able to handle certain situations like some of the other officers are, either assigned to a bike or a patrol car. But they really bring a presence, a police presence throughout the parks, throughout the downtown area. We have special details assigned to the bar districts during the evening hours. Really brings a strong sense of calm to somewhat unruly situations sometimes. So really, there's a lot of different avenues that we use this particular unit. Obviously specialized. They're trained in order to handle police situations and take care of their mounts at the same time. Obviously, we don't want the horses running wild throughout the city. These are highly trained officers that that really do a fine job, and the citizens of Manchester really enjoy their presence. So
These guys attend a monthly training somewhere in the region, whether it's with Mass State Police or Boston Police, and essentially they learn about crowd control and other important items. And that's after they go through that intensive 2-week school up in Ottawa, Canada, put on by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So they're
So it's
highly
not just for
trained.
show.
Absolutely not.
no.
They provide a vital function here in Manchester.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then we can, if we've covered that, then we can move on to the bike patrol. I think people appreciate the bike patrol as well. And so we have police on bikes,
Sure. Yeah.
and the advantages to that, and how do you operate? Do you operate the alleys and more difficult places you want to
All
get
of
into?
the above. The bikes are probably one of the most essential tools that we have in our department. Captain Soucy, as a young officer, was on the bikes. I was on the bikes as a young officer. Community policing, the fundamentals are the nice weather is here. We want the officers assigned to community policing out on their bicycles. It really breaks down the barrier of the 4 walls of a police car. So that goes back to the proactive versus reactive. You break down that barrier, you're on a bicycle, you're talking to someone face to face, there's no car, you're not driving, you're actually engaging more with the community, which essentially is what community policing is all about. and our guys are out on the bicycles, they take cruises. It's just a means of transportation for an officer to do their job effectively and efficiently.
Great. And, well, maybe it's time to get into the lock it or lose it, since we're talking about,
Sure.
you know, the inner city area. I know it was a little bit controversial, but we do have lock it or lose it program in Manchester.
We actually have an official sign here that you will see throughout various neighborhoods in the city.
I think you have to put it between
Oh.
both of you, yeah. Okay.
Essentially,
There you go.
these signs were placed, I believe we have 12 out right now, we ordered 10 more, and our crime analysis unit basically looks into the amount of crimes. I think in the month of March of this year, we had over 116 thefts from motor vehicles. Now, this is nothing more than a friendly reminder to the citizens of the Queen City to say, look, lock your car when it's unattended. 50% of our car thefts from motor vehicles, the victim stated their car was unsecured. Now, the other 50%, most of those people said they're not sure. So theoretically, you could have anywhere from 50 to 100% of the time the car was unlocked. And this is a friendly reminder. Remember, if you leave valuable items in your car, most criminals, it's a crime of opportunity. If they see a GPS, a laptop, quick concealable items that you can stuff in a backpack, chances are it may get taken. And when you look at what's going on, not just here, but across the country with heroin and whatnot, you know, these quick crimes of opportunity, it's easy to strike. And if you lock your car, chances are that criminal's going to keep walking, because breaking a window causes noise, which causes someone to be suspicious, which may lead to them being arrested or apprehended.
Right. Now, in talking about those statistics, about how many break-ins or let-ins that have occurred, and if all those people call the police department and say, you know, do a report for my insurance company or whatever it is, that's taking time away from valuable other
Correct.
work.
Right. There is a ripple effect, and obviously we want to decrease the amount of work and focus our efforts elsewhere. And if it can be something as simple as locking your car door and preventing that crime, locking your door to the house, you know, your storage shed or whatnot, something as simple as that can help everybody out.
Right. Okay, then, so another thing we have is school resource officers for an officer to go to if you're on school premises or you have children in schools, and the nearest officer, he's also a community police officer, is he not?
They all of our officers, like you know, Brian had mentioned earlier, everyone is trained in the community
And that's
policing
just
concept.
a different
It's
expertise.
Yeah, school resource officers are assigned to the juvenile division. So specifically, they fall under that division, not our division. But certainly, they're just as easily found and located either at the schools. Again, on the website, you'll locate the juvenile division. The school resource officers are all listed. They all have their department-issued cell phones. They all have their department emails.
They definitely can help you
Absolutely.
with any question you have.
Absolutely, and the parents and kids routinely use them.
And so I'm sure people are wondering, okay, in community policing, how are you going to combat, you know, the illegal drugs that are on the streets? And is there anything you can say about that and how you're trying to be proactive against that?
Well, that's a whole separate division. We have our
Oh, okay.
Special Enforcement Division, but I can tell you in 2014, our Special Enforcement Division seized over 950 grams of heroin. Or actually, it was 1,080 grams of heroin last year. This year alone, they've already seized over 1,000. So as far as being proactive and trying to combat the problem, our guys in our Special Enforcement Division are going above and beyond. And, you know, some of these problems, here's a good for instance, you call up and say, I live on 123 Smith Street, and I know my neighbor's dealing, why aren't you doing something? Now, we as community policing officers may get that, and the first thing we do is check with our Special Enforcement Division, say, do you have an active investigation? If they don't, we look into it and see how we can break down the barrier and maybe fix the problem. Now, a lot of times, if SED has an active investigation, that investigation can take up to 8 months, a year. They had a big bust last week. It was an 8-month-long investigation. So I think it's imperative that the public knows that although you call and say we have a problem address with drugs, we're aware of it, but if we are in the midst of an active investigation, we cannot tell you that. So we'll say we're working on it, and that may lead to frustration from a citizen, and rightfully so. However, the end justifies the means when you're taking a bad guy off the street and eliminating that amount of drugs.
So the resident can just maybe call and give you updates, saying new license plate numbers.
Absolutely.
You know, if they, what do you call it, see something, say something?
Absolutely.
Anything new that might develop at that address or that
Correct.
everyone's watching out for?
Right.
So it's important for our members of our community to be engaged with helping to fight crime. And
Well, and that's why we have neighborhood watch groups.
that was going to, yeah.
And the neighborhood watch groups are something that we oversee in the community policing division. And essentially, we want the public to know we may work our 8 hours. You live in your neighborhood. You are there 24/7. So it's no different than if he's at home or I'm at home. If I see something out of the ordinary, I call the police department. And don't be afraid to call the police department because it goes back to the essentials. If you feel something is wrong, listen to your initial instinct. If you feel something is wrong, contact us. We'll get someone out there to check it out. And it may be something or it may be nothing.
And you don't have to always give your name as a resident if
No.
you don't feel comfortable doing that.
Correct.
Correct.
For any repercussion you might feel that might happen. There's also the anonymous crime line,
That's correct.
tip line or crime line. But any information that comes to the department will go into the statistics or rather into the information that gets gathered to make either a hotspot or
We sort information on a daily basis.
Okay.
We have residents call in on a daily and hourly basis with tips, things that they see on TV and whatnot. So we're always welcoming information from the public.
We have a weekly staff meeting on Mondays, and I believe, typically the average phone calls that come into the PD are around 4,500 to 5,200 phone calls a week. I mean, that's a lot of phone calls.
Right.
And as the captain stated, we kind of sort the information out accordingly.
Okay, so if we can, for the viewers, a half hour goes by pretty fast. If we can just let them know about the ways they can keep abreast of the police department, like you said, Twitter, I think.
Absolutely.
So we'll go through the contact information that way. You said another.
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing is log on to the city website, manchesternh.gov, and you can click on the left and all the links of departments and go to the police department. Then that breaks it down to the 6 divisions. Or we have a Twitter account, which is at MHT_NH_police. And then another free service is Nixle. Nixle is pretty much a government service that provides you, if you're not on Twitter all the time, you sign up for a free Nixle account, and important things may get nixled, like road closures. Say an arrest happened last week. We had a shooting on a Thursday morning. We nixled out that the intersection was going to be closed for about an hour, and it's a free service. It goes to your Twitter account, it goes to your email, and it texts you a message as well.
So stay informed, folks. And our time is over here. And maybe in the future we'll have the officers on again, and we can get an update maybe in a few months. But anyhow, we thank you for tuning in to Our City Matters. We thank you, Captain Soucy and Lieutenant O'Keefe,
Thanks
for
for
joining
having
us
us.
today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for informing.